outside of his home at Rideau Cottage. The Prime Minister will undoubtedly be reacting and talking more about those truly staggering job numbers out today. 2 million more jobs lost across this country in April. That is in addition to the 1 million jobs that disappeared in March. And I should mention the numbers in the United States, equally stunning. 20 million jobs gone because of the pandemic shutdowns. Unemployment numbers are smashing records that no one wants to smash on both sides of the border, so we'll take you through all of that and get the Prime Minister's reaction too. And I should say, although we're up to 3 million unemployed Canadians right now, the number of people no longer employed or working much less than before is actually a much higher number. Closer to over 5 million of you have been affected in some way in your jobs, either by losing your jobs entirely or working far less than you did before. I'll bring in my colleagues now, the host of Power and Politics, Vashi Kapelos, and the CBC's Catherine Cullen here in our Parliamentary Bureau. To talk more about this. So I know we shouldn't be surprised to see these numbers grow and grow and grow, but they do continue to be sort of staggering when you think about the fact that these are Canadians who no longer have work and many more Canadians who no longer have enough hours. And that would explain why 7.6 million of them are now using the emergency relief benefit created by the government to deal with this. Vashi, anything stand out for you in the labour market report?
Yeah, certainly, Rosie. A couple of things. And the first is what you point out, though there is that initial drop in full-time and part-time employment. So more than 2 million Canadians, or just under 2 million Canadians rather, have lost full-time jobs since February. Another million have lost their part-time jobs. When you combine with that the number of Canadians who have lost at least half their hours, that's another 2.5 million Canadians. So that's how many people so far, and most economists are saying that's even underreported at this point, have been incredibly affected by what's happened because of this pandemic. A couple of things underlying all of that jumped out for me. First of all, the demographics behind it, and in particular, the number of young people who are currently unemployed. So many students we had been hearing from prior to the announcement from the government about how they intend to help those students, for a good reason. The unemployment rate among students aged 15 to 24, the unemployment rate increased to 31.7%. So basically, 1 of every 3 young person in this country is unemployed. That is a huge and staggering number. The other number that really jumped out at me, and I should say on the students, we're still, the application process is supposed to open up for the help that the government has promised. I've been getting messages from a lot of students asking, when will that page be up? I know we're going to hear from Minister Qualtrough today. Hopefully we'll get some details on that for people who have been asking. The other thing that really jumps out at me is that this is sort of seems counterintuitive, but the average hourly earnings from April 2019 to April 20 actually increased nearly 11%. And what that underscores is that the people whom are most affected by this, the people who are most losing their jobs or losing hours, are actually the lowest paid in this country. And that is something sort of anecdotally we have thought and we have heard about, but especially when you think of the service sector or other sectors that are particularly hit, people who are earning the least among us are the ones who are disproportionately most affected. And we see that because those who still retain their jobs, the income has, overall, when you look at the numbers, the income has gone up because those who have retained their jobs are higher earners.
Yeah, and it does sort of make you worry, I think, for the future in terms of the widening inequality gap between the people who make the most money in this country versus those who make the least, because it certainly is having a different impact on those two parts of the population. That is where we're expecting the Prime Minister shortly. And I should tell you that these are unprecedented numbers. The last time we saw an unemployment rate of 13% was back towards the end of the recession in the late 80s. But even then, the number of people not working at that point is, we have surpassed that in a really dramatic way. Catherine, I know you've also been looking in the details of those numbers to tell us more about who the Canadians are that have been most affected.
Well, let's start with another way of looking at the big picture of all of this, Rosemary. One of the statistics in here, and it is a lot of numbers today, but of course every single one of those numbers tells an important story about people's lives. 1/3 of the potential workforce is what Statistics Canada calls underutilized. So that means they're either not working or they're working fewer hours than they were before. 1/3 1/3 of the potential workforce. Is really a staggering number. One of the angles I've been looking at in all of this has to do with how women are affected by this pandemic. When we saw the numbers, the last labor force survey, there was a real, quite striking difference between men and women in terms of how they were being affected, because a lot of the jobs being lost in March, they were service jobs in the service sector, the restaurant industry, retail sector. This month, we're seeing a lot more job losses coming through in construction, in manufacturing. So we're starting to see those numbers evening out a bit. But still, your economists say when you compare this to previous recessions, previous instances of economic downturns, women are really being affected in greater numbers than we're used to seeing. And that raises some interesting questions, as all of this does, about how we go about trying to improve the situation. Traditionally, when you want to stimulate the economy, shovels in the ground. We've all heard it. It's construction jobs. Now, that is likely, more often than not, to get more men back to work. And I know some of the economists I've been speaking to are wondering about how childcare fits into all of this, because of course, if you start bringing men back into the workforce, first, there are questions, first of all, about whether many of those service jobs continue to exist, and also if the women are, in most cases, the ones who are at home taking care of the children, does that prevent them from making the decision to go back to work? Childcare certainly is going to be an important part of this picture, but also the decisions that various levels of government make about what this restart looks like and how to try to help people during all of this.
Yeah, okay. Glad you highlighted that group of people too, obviously affected in a different way. I'm going to get both of you just to stick around if I can for a moment. I'll also just pull out this one statistic too from Statistics Canada that was of interest to my producer Phil and I, and that is that 3.3 million Canadians are worked from home in the month of April. So even if you haven't lost your job or had reduced hours, your life has changed dramatically if you're now just working out of your home office or your kitchen counter. I want to talk about another important part of this story as we move into like a different phase of dealing with the pandemic, and that is some of the tracking of information, development of this virus, contact tracing, all the data that will be so important, was important up to now, will be important as we move into a different phase where we're all trying to get out a little bit more. Dr. Kamran Khan is an infectious disease physician and scientist at St. Michael's Hospital. He's an associate professor of medicine at the U of T, and this is part of the reason why he's here, he's the founder and CEO of Blue Dot, which uses big data to provide early warnings on potential epidemics to governments and agencies around the world. And Dr. Khan joins me from Toronto. Good to see you, Doctor.
Good morning.
So I think if people don't know, your company was one of the first to spot this virus and even get a sense of where it's moving. I want to move into what you're doing now, though, if I can, to try and better understand what you're looking for. You have a relationship with the Government of Canada and some other countries and agencies. So what are you watching right now when you gather and look at that data?
Yeah, as you mentioned, we've really been building this digital early warning system to look at the entire life cycle of an outbreak, from early detection to risk of spread across international borders. Today, we're fighting this outbreak here in our backyards and looking at measures like physical distancing to try and see if we can slow the spread of this virus. Within Canada, we are working with and analyzing anonymous data from millions of mobile devices. I do want to emphasize the point that it's anonymous and aggregated data to really understand where physical distancing measures are working, perhaps where they are not, and also how fatigue is setting in and how is this changing week over week. Also, as we start to move from emergency response and make those initial steps towards economic recovery, these are the kinds of data that will help us make that transition as safely as possible.
You talked about anonymous data. I get your point that it's not maybe attached to a name or a phone number, but it still gives you a picture of where people are and what they're doing. So what should people know about how you're keeping that data safe? Because Canada's privacy commissioners, as you well know, this week have expressed some serious concerns around apps and those kinds of things that are going to be used for contact tracing. So maybe give us a sense of what you're doing with the data and when you get rid of it or dispose of it.
Yeah. No, first of all, I think privacy is an incredibly important issue, and I'm glad that you raised it. What I'll share with you is what we're not doing is you've been hearing quite a bit about contact tracing apps where your location can be connected to other people that you were in proximity with. And essentially the purpose of this is to give the public health community better insights about who you may have exposed if you were, to become infected, so that they can contact those individuals and get in front of the disease. What we're doing is something very different. We're analyzing data. It's just basically location data. There's no information associated with the name of an individual or anything to that effect. And we're analyzing that in aggregate. So getting an understanding of how populations are moving so that we can really better understand how this virus is moving. The measures that we have to tackle this today, because the virus is quite active, are some of these physical distancing interventions. And so we need to understand where those are working and where they are not working, so that we can inform our public health responses and use our finite human resources in the most efficient way possible.
So can you give me a sense of what you're seeing then, without giving away all the secrets that you're giving to public health? But as we get into this phase of some restrictions being lifted in some parts of the country, can you give me a sense of where you're seeing things that might be problematic?
Well, it's quite heterogeneous across the country. I mean, I think in general, there's been a huge trend toward, population staying at home, following many of the recommendations around physical distancing. But there are pockets in some areas, in rural areas perhaps, where some of those movements are starting to increase. And we are seeing little bits of fatigue occurring. There's also important differences that we're seeing across weekdays and weekends. So there are some insights here that are really important and can help guide our public health response. And this is particularly important now as we start to perhaps ease or take those initial baby steps to ease some of these restrictions, and to do this in a way that is safe and minimizes risk.
You also have a relationship, a business arrangement with Air Canada, which obviously is not flying very much right now. But I'd be interested to know, other than being on alert for finding infectious diseases and flagging them to the company, what kind of data are you gathering from Air Canada, and how are they helping you to understand the spread?
Well, I think I would describe it perhaps a little bit differently, in the sense that we've been working with Air Canada well before COVID-19.
Yes.
And this is putting systems in place to be able to monitor and understand infectious disease risk around the world. You can understand why an airline would want to understand this, to be protecting its employees and its customers, understanding and anticipating disruption in travel. So this is really about even thinking past COVID-19 and thinking about the fact that outbreaks are occurring around the world on an ongoing and regular basis. And how do we help empower not just government, but industry as well, so they can mitigate risks to their employees, mitigate risks of financial and economic impacts. Ultimately, we need to be really empowering the whole of society if we're going to get in front of these types of infectious disease outbreaks, which we're seeing now with greater frequency than we have ever in the past.
You are now at a point where we are, a few months into this, and we have seen different responses across the globe, depending on where we are. We certainly know, and you were on 60 Minutes last week talking about this, that even though there was information as early as the beginning of January for countries to start moving, not all countries did what they should have been doing at the right time. And of course, in this instance, it was the United States. Can you assess how Canada has done, given the information they had early on? I know that's a very big question, but how we have done in terms of our response to try and contain things.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a broad question. A lot of the intel was available. Obviously, the Canadian government also has a system called GFIN, or the Global Public Health Intelligence Network, to be scanning and doing this type of horizon scanning. We had been working with the Public Health Agency well before COVID-19 came into play. So a lot of the analytics that I've described, actually, I haven't talked about the world's air travel patterns and data. At a different stage of this outbreak, we were thinking about how it might disperse. And so these are the kinds of insights and analytics that are needed to empower smart decisions. Now, at Blue Dot, our work is really focused on generating these insights, but we need these types of partnerships in order to translate insights into actions. And ultimately, really, these are the things you want to be doing in peacetime. You don't want to be trying to figure this out in the middle of an emergency. So, that relationship predates COVID-19 and continues over this next phase of the pandemic.
Has it surprised you, in spite of all the analytics and data you've gathered, has it surprised you how quickly this has spread and changed the world in such a dramatic way?
Well, you know what I would say is that every single expert out there in this field will have told you pre-COVID-19, this is not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when.
Right.
I think for many of us, it is unfortunately a fact that our brains are kind of hardwired. We're reactive rather than proactive in many of these instances. I think the scale and scope has been pretty staggering, and I think it's probably caught us all off by surprise just how interconnected and interdependent our world is and how this little virus has crippled the planet. So it is perhaps not surprising that we are in the middle of a pandemic, but I think the extent and scope of this has really surprised all of us.
I only have about a minute before the Prime Minister comes out his front door there, Dr. Khan, but you talked about the importance of privacy and you gathering what you call anonymous data, things that don't identify who the information is coming from. Do you think, though, that Canadians should be willing to sacrifice a little bit of privacy in order to better participate in keeping people healthy and helping public health policy?
Let me just say that, certainly the intent here and our work is really ultimately about safeguarding communities and lives. This is a very important discussion for us to have as a society about where are the lines? Where do we want to balance privacy and impact on public health? There are trade-offs, and I think this is really important for us to be having this discussion. As an organization that is focused on responding to COVID-19 right now, we are really just focusing on ways that we can counter the transmission of this virus. But this is a really important discussion for us to be having, and I'm glad that it's occurring.
Okay. Dr. Khan, good of you to make the time when you're so busy. Important information that you're gathering for all of us, too. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
That's Dr. Kamran Khan, infectious disease specialist and founder and CEO of Blue Dot, which, as we were talking about there, tracks epidemics and provides warnings to governments and global agencies. I realize that was maybe a little bit backwards and not exactly what the Prime Minister is going to talk about there, but it is things that everyone is thinking about as different provinces in this country move, for instance, into contact tracing apps to get a better sense of where you're going, who you're associating with, and how community spread might happen. What Blue Dot's doing, of course, a little bit different, a little higher view of things, if you will, in terms of gathering information. But important conversation nonetheless as we try and figure out what the steps forward will be in this country, what the new normal, as the Prime Minister always talks about, will look like. And here he is now. Of course, the Prime Minister's focus today will be the 2 million jobs lost in the month of April, 1 million in March, now up to 3 million Canadians who no longer have jobs. Let's listen in.
Earlier today, we received the job report for April. These numbers tell us what we already knew, that right now, Canadians are hurting because of this pandemic. Everyone has their own story, but it all boils down to a very difficult time for a lot of people. Canadians aren't alone in this, as the world faces COVID-19. But if you're out of work, you don't need to hear that other people are out of work too. You need to know that there's a plan to get you through this and get you back on the job. And that's exactly what this government is focused on. Today,
we received the employment report for the month of April, and the figures confirm what we've known for some time now. Many of you are suffering. You're hurting because of this pandemic. And what matters most to you is knowing that there is a plan to help you get through this and return to work as quickly as possible. And that is what our government is focused on.
In the face of this unprecedented challenge, we've taken action. Maybe you're one of the more than 7 million people getting the CERB to help make ends meet. Or better yet, maybe thanks to the wage subsidy, your employer has been able to rehire you. That's what happened for people who work at Pursuit, a Banff tourism company. They're back on the job because of this program. We created the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy to protect jobs wherever possible. Since it launched last week, employers have applied for subsidies for almost 2 million workers. And as provinces and territories start to gradually reopen over the coming months, and the CERB becomes less and less needed, this subsidy will play an even greater role. That's why I can announce today that we will be extending the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy beyond June to help kickstart our economic reopening and boost jobs. We'll have more details next week, but to businesses hit by COVID-19, know this. The wage subsidy will continue to be there for you to help you keep your employees on the payroll. So fill out the application at canada.ca if you haven't already done so. And if you had to let people go, try to bring them back. It's those workers who will drive our economy's short and long-term recovery. On other support, the Canada Emergency Business Account has been accessed by well over 500,000 businesses to give them much-needed loans. Between the CBA and the wage subsidy, we're helping employers across the country keep Canadians on the job. Now, even though we're reaching millions of Canadians, we need to reach even more. We're working around the clock to update and adjust so that help gets to as many workers, small businesses, families, and young people as possible. We also know that some sectors have been hit especially hard, so we're stepping up on that, too. Minister Baines will be leading a new Industry Strategy Council. Chaired by Monique Leroux, this council will take a deeper dive into how the pandemic is affecting specific sectors and how to best support them. We're leveraging expertise from the economic strategy tables we set up in the first mandate, as well as looking to new industry leaders. This will be a dedicated forum for industry and government to come together on tackling the effects of COVID-19. And it builds on what we've already done for workers in everything from energy to agriculture. On that note, Minister Guilbeault will have more details at noon about how our $500 million package for arts, culture, and amateur sport is now being rolled out to support workers in those sectors. This investment will help people access wage support and help organizations access funding. Our artists, creators, and young athletes inspire us and help us feel connected even when we're at home. They're there for us, and we're going to be there for them. No matter where you work, no matter who you are, these are tough times. But with the right plan, we will get through this, and we'll come back stronger than ever. Le Canada
Canada is facing an unprecedented challenge, so we've taken measures that are also unprecedented. You may be among the 7 million Canadians who are receiving the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, or perhaps you were rehired thanks to the Emergency Wage Subsidy. We created that subsidy to protect jobs as much as possible. Since the launch of the program last week, employers have already applied for the wage subsidy for some 2 million workers. And today, I am announcing that we will be extending the wage subsidy beyond the month of June to kickstart the economy and also boost job creation. We will have additional details on this next week, but Canadian businesses affected by COVID-19 should know this. The wage subsidy will be there for you and your workers. I invite you to apply on canada.ca if you haven't done so already. And if you had to lay people off, try to rehire those employees if possible. Those workers are the ones that will help us to kickstart the economy in the long and short term. Canadians want to work, so we're going to help them to return to work. Thanks to this wage subsidy, there are other measures, such as the Canada Emergency Business Account, that is helping employers to keep their employees on the payroll. Today, we also have news for the culture sector. Minister Guilbeault will be providing additional details on this, but basically, we are supporting artists, cultural industries, musicians, young athletes, and creators. To understand the consequence of COVID-19 on these sectors, we are introducing the Industry Strategic Council. It will be be chaired by Monique Leroux, and the Council's mandate will be to take a deep dive into the effects of COVID-19 in specific sectors, and particularly to look at what we can do to support workers. We are taking advantage of the knowledge of and expertise of the economic strategic tables we put in place previously, as well as that of new leaders. We are going through a difficult time right now, but with the right plan, we will come back stronger than ever.
It's hard to think of tougher times for our country, but as our elders remind us, Canada has faced challenges before, and we've always overcome them. Today, we mark the 75th anniversary of Victory in Europe Day and the end of the Second World War on the continent. After 6 years of war, it must have felt like that day would never come. But it did. And it came because of the courage of all who served and because of the sacrifice of all who gave their lives. It has been 75 years since our grandparents and great-grandparents stood up to do their part. 75 years since they stood united and strong to ensure that we would live in peace and freedom. Today, as our generation faces our own battle, let us be inspired by them and their valor as we protect them and all Canadians. This is our challenge, and I know we will rise to meet it. Merci.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We'll now go to the phone lines for questions. One question, one follow-up. Operator?
Thank you. Merci. The first question is from Jamie Tashagumscum from APTN. Line open.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. As we all know, Indigenous communities in the North are vulnerable due to social conditions like lack of housing and lack of medical facilities. And it's been said that Indigenous communities are 2 weeks behind the curve. Now, with provinces relaxing restrictions, some of these communities might see that as a threat. Do you agree with that opinion? And secondly, what would your advice be to those communities?
From the very beginning of this pandemic, we have seen that and known that Indigenous communities, particularly northern and remote ones, are particularly vulnerable to the spread of COVID-19, given existing challenges around medical facilities, things like overcrowding and other socioeconomic realities. That's why from the beginning, we have made specific investments to support Indigenous communities as the country grapples with this pandemic. Right across the country, as certain regions are reopening, there is a recognition that other regions are going to need continued adjustments and continued protections, and we will ensure that we continue to work all together on protecting Indigenous communities who are indeed more vulnerable, even as other parts of the economy are looking at opening up.
Follow up, Jamie?
Yeah, okay, so they've been doing pretty well so far, but like I said, they're 2 weeks behind the curve. So with provinces opening up, what would you suggest that they do?
I think we need to make sure we're keeping extremely vigilant and preventing outside cases from entering those communities. We've seen, for example, Nunavut be very successful, not just remaining 2 weeks behind the curve, but months behind the curve as they continue to have no cases because of very strong travel restrictions that were brought in immediately and have served to keep the vulnerable and remote communities in our far north completely COVID-free. But right across the country, various communities will take appropriate measures, and we will be there as a government and other orders of government as well to support them in doing the things that need to be done to keep elders and all in those communities safe.
Thank you. Next question, operator.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Michel Lamarche, TVA Nouvelle. À vous.
Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. I'd like to know, since you are now talking about extending the wage subsidy, do you think you will do the same thing with the emergency response benefit? The Canada Emergency Response benefit will already be continuing longer than the wage subsidy. And we also recognize that gradually, in the weeks and months to come, the economy will start to recover, and therefore fewer people will need that emergency benefit. They will return to work, and probably more people will decide to take advantage of the wage subsidy. That's why we're announcing today that we will be extending it so that it can be used for a longer period. But we will continue to adjust to what we're doing as the situation evolves. And from the beginning of this crisis, we have been there to adjust as required and enhance and improve our approach so that we can help as many people as possible, given the current situation.
From the beginning, we recognized that we needed to constantly adjust and improve the delivery of these unprecedented mechanisms to support Canadians who are suffering through this particular crisis. That's why we recognize that there are many different things we need to do as the economy starts to reopen. The Canada Emergency Response Benefit had always been planned to last longer, or had a timeline that was already longer than the wage subsidy. But we recognize that as the economy starts to reopen, people will be getting back to work, leaving the emergency response benefit, and perhaps going on to the wage subsidy as employers bring people back on and get them back to work as our economy picks up over the coming weeks and months. That's why we will constantly be adjusting to make sure that Canadians are getting the support they need as we look to carefully and gradually restarting our economy.
Follow up? Yes, of course. I would like to know, with respect to the wage subsidy, how long it should be extended, or will we need to extend it? And will the reopening of the economy, does it cause you any concern? Do you think that perhaps relaxing the rules is being done too quickly? Well, right from the beginning, we have said just how important it is to gradually reopen the economy and to be extremely vigilant in order to monitor how COVID-19 is spreading. And that's how we have invested massively in testing. And that's also the reason why we must ensure that the proper mechanisms are in place right across the country as the economy reopens. The wage subsidy will be extended beyond June, and we will have more details to announce on that next week. But I can already say to those businesses that are looking at how they're going to be able to start up again, that the wage subsidy will be there for them for quite a long time to come, and they should start right now to rehire their workers so that they can create that job attachment with their workers so that we can get the economy started again quickly.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, Mike Blanchfield, the Canadian Press. Line open.
Hello, Prime Minister. Two successive job reports are showing that women in service roles have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. In light of that, what specific measures do you think are needed to strengthen Canada's economic recovery?
This is one of the first recessions we've ever seen that has so hard hit vulnerable workers in the service sector, particularly women and new Canadians and young people. And that was evident in the March numbers and continues to be the case in the April numbers. What we're seeing, even beyond these reports and these numbers, is the reality on the ground that people who are already vulnerable in the workforce, people who are already disadvantaged or facing extra barriers are always the first to get hit when we have a difficult situation like this. That's why as a society, not only do we need to do what we are doing in the short term to give extra supports to vulnerable people, But we need to make sure that as we move forward to rebuilding and creating a more prosperous Canada in the coming months and years, we think very, very carefully about how important the work is that is being done by women and vulnerable Canadians, and how we need to make sure we're better supporting them, not just for potential future crises, but for business as usual as our country comes back to normal.
This crisis has hit women and vulnerable people, as well as new Canadians and young people, very, very hard. Their jobs were among the first to disappear. And that's why we introduced specific measures to help those vulnerable Canadians in particular. But beyond this crisis, we will have to look at how to rebuild the economy and ensure at that point that vulnerable people are not hit hard in the same way, and how we're going to look after all Canadians to have a fair country for everyone.
Yes, Prime Minister. Well, given that reality on the ground that you're talking about, and that these vulnerable people are, as you say, the first to get hit, how will you ensure that government stimulus money helps those people first and does not go instead to the bottom lines of big corporations?
Well, we are not yet talking about stimulus. We are still very much in the support and emergency phase right now. And that's why from the beginning, the measures we put forward have been entirely focused on Canadians. With the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, that's over 7 million people across this country who have benefited from that. With the wage subsidy that goes to workers. Employers don't keep a penny of that. They pass it through to their workers so that workers have that continued link with their job and get a paycheck that will ensure that as the economy reopens, they will be able to come back to work quickly and smoothly. Our focus every step of the way, even on supporting small businesses, has been ensuring that people are able to keep jobs going for Canadians from coast to coast to coast. We will, over the coming days, start looking at specific sectoral supports for various industries that have been hit particularly hard by COVID-19. But even then, our focus will be on the workers, on the supply chains that involve many, many small businesses across this country for many of these industries, and not on the corporate well-being of an industry or of a sector, but indeed staying focused on helping Canadians, because it is Canadians who are at the heart of our economic success, at the heart of our success as a country, and as a government, we will always stay focused on them.
Thank you. We'll take one more question on the phone. Operator.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Marie Vastel, Le Devoir. À vous.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau. J'aimerais
Good morning,
revenir sur la
Mr. Trudeau.
prestation
I'd like to come
canadienne
back to the emergency response benefit. We're seeing that schools and daycares are starting to reopen, and there's a lot of questions about the teachers and the daycare workers who at this point are not feeling safe about going back to work and who may refuse. And as a result, they may want to get the response benefit. And yet the Quebec government is saying that this is a safe environment. Now, what should people do when they feel their workplace is not safe? Is that enough to apply for the emergency response benefit? Well, in no cases and at no time should a Canadian be working somewhere where they're concerned about their safety and their health. We have very specific and significant standards in place in this country to ensure that even in normal times, workers are able to work safely. Now, in this pandemic, those concerns are even greater, and that is why that in the principles that we put forward with the provinces and territories, the aspect of safety at work is absolutely critical when it comes to reopening the economy. And we expect that work conditions for Canadians even for critical workers, will be safe enough for people to feel confident about returning to work.
One of the things that is fundamental in Canada is that no one, whether in crisis times or in regular times, should be working in a job in conditions that are unsafe or put them at risk. That is a fundamental principle of Canada that we will always ensure to uphold. In this particular situation, there are heightened concerns about health for a large number of people, for everyone, but particularly and even in essential work sectors. We need to make sure that we are putting in place all the necessary measures so that people can feel confident about their own safety, about having minimized the risks as they get back to work. That's why we put that as one of the fundamental principles that needs to be in place before any sector talks about reopening the economy. That was part of the principles agreed to by the provinces and the federal government on relaunching our economy.
Minister Murray?
Follow-up?
Merci. Cela dit, vous parlez des
Having
conditions
said
qui
that,
doivent
you're
être
talking about
respectées, que ce lieu
specific
de travail-là
conditions that
soit
have to be
sécuritaire, mais
in
qui
place and the
détermine
workplaces
si
have to
le
be safe.
lieu de travail
But
est
how can
sécuritaire
you
ou pas?
determine whether a
Je vous
workplace
repose ma
is
question. Est-ce qu'une
safe?
personne
So my
peut
question
elle-même
again, can
déterminer dans sa
someone
perception
determine, based on
personnelle
their
qu'elle ne
own
se
personal
sent pas en
perception,
sécurité
that
d'aller
they are
travailler
not
dans une
safe
garderie?
in their
Ou
workplace,
est-ce
for
que le
example, a
gouvernement
daycare
va
center?
décider
And
de la
will the government
légitimité d'une
decide
demande
to
de PCU?
allow those people to receive the response benefit? Well, I think, as is the case with any situation, depending on the different cases, the government will have things to say about the specific needs of certain sectors or industries. But we also know that in some cases, and that certainly applies to someone who is caring for a senior at home and feels particularly vulnerable or has a pre-existing medical condition, there, the levels of protection that are needed may vary from case to case, and we will all have to be very attentive to those realities and be reasonable in order to ensure that the proper measures are in place to protect people. Radio-Canada, there will be a recovery, an economic recovery in Canada at some point, and are there certain sectors of the economy that will need more support? And will you take advantage of that recovery to transform the Canadian economy? Well, certainly we will be gradually reopening the Canadian economy in many sectors right across the country. But at the same time, we will have to reflect on how that recovery should happen to ensure that people are safe, because COVID-19 will still be with us. But I think we also realize that there are both challenges and advantages in working at home, and I think we may have to invest more in digital technology and do things a bit more quickly in that area than before. We will also have to focus on the fight against climate change, and that will allow us to do more in some sectors of the economy. So I think it is important to think now about what the economy will look like 2 years from now or 10 years from now, and to start working on that. But at the same time, what we want, especially, is to again create prosperity for Canadians. Now, we saw in the numbers this morning that young people are particularly affected by job losses. Will you be extending the benefits for students? Now, we have already planned for that support for students to continue until August. Now, normally, students, when they finish their university or college year, get a job for the summer so that they have money to pay their tuition or meet their own personal needs during the school year. So the student assistance benefit is there to replace the thousands of jobs that simply will not be there for young people this summer. And we know that young people want to work and will be looking among the jobs that are being created through the summer jobs program and the new programs that have been created such as jobs in vulnerable sectors. But we want to help students to continue until September and beyond.
Minister Tom Perry with CBC. I'd like to ask you about the jobs numbers again. You were talking about just how some groups are getting hit disproportionately hard, thinking young people, thinking women. What specifically can the government do as the recovery begins to make sure that these groups aren't permanently set back?
I think the idea of permanent challenges is particularly poignant for young people, where we know that a summer without work experience, a summer where they are struggling to pay their groceries or their rent, is a significant setback in their march towards economic independence and successful outcomes after their schooling. That's why we put in place the Canada Emergency Student Benefit to help them this summer make sure that there aren't long-term impacts. On women particularly that we've seen have been extremely impacted by this economic challenge as well as a health challenge. We have moved forward on supports for them, particularly more emergency supports for women who are facing challenges of domestic violence. But at the same time, we know we have to do more. The importance of childcare has been yet again emphasized, that as we move towards an economic restarting, there needs to be more and secure childcare spaces for people to get back into the workforce. These are the kinds of things that we're going to have to think about, both in the immediate but also for the longer term, to make sure that equality in this country is more than just a goal, but is a concrete reality.
I think there are a lot of concerns we all have about the future years, and groups like young people and women could suffer the negative consequences of this crisis for many years, much longer than others. And that's precisely why we introduced the Emergency Student Benefit, which will support students this summer until the end of August, so that they can continue their studies without feeling too much of an impact of this crisis, and also creating more job opportunities so that many of them can gain the necessary experience that will be very helpful in the coming years. With respect to women, we know that there is always more to do to create a fairer society. We know that there needs to be more help for shelters and other facilities that help the victims of domestic violence. We have already provided assistance, but there's more to be done. Now, when it comes to daycare centers, of course, they are very important to Canada's recovery and particularly important to families and women. And that's why we're looking exactly now at what we can do there.
Transit in Toronto, the TTC is going to be making some historic cuts to its service because of the pandemic. Transit groups have been calling on the federal government to provide emergency funding, keep buses, trains rolling, get emergency or essential workers to their jobs. Is that something that the government could look at?
This government has made historic investments in transit over the past years. We recognize that public transit is an essential part of growing the economy, of helping our cities, and mostly helping people be able to get to work from home in a reliable way. That's why we believe so deeply in transit. Operation of transit is more of a municipal and provincial responsibility, and we hope to see the provinces stepping up on supporting this essential element of the economic relaunch. People are going to need to be able to get to and from work as we want to get the economy going again. But the federal government is always looking to be a partner in helping out in terms of economic relaunch wherever we can.
Prime Minister Rachel Haynes from CTV National News. Last week you were saying that help is coming for seniors. They have been asking for the last few weeks where the help for them is. You're talking about the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, which gives $2,000 to the people who you say need it most. But seniors are still vulnerable and they still need to pay their rent and their groceries, and they're saying that the government programs that they receive still don't add up to $2,000. So why do some people deserve $2,000 from the government and other people don't?
First of all, we have worked very, very hard to help all Canadians with replacement of income that has been lost during this. We knew that workers who were expecting to get a paycheck to be able to pay for their groceries, to be able to pay for their rent, and suddenly because of COVID-19 lost their job, and there were millions of them, as we saw in the recent job numbers today. Needed to get that income replacement. And we did that with the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. Seniors, many of whom are on fixed incomes, did not see that disappearance of their income at the same time, although some did, and many qualify for the CERB, even as seniors, and therefore are getting the support. At the same time, however, we recognize that there are additional costs and additional vulnerabilities that seniors have been facing, and that's why we have made investments, whether it's through increasing the GST supplement that hits many, many vulnerable seniors, whether it's through new programs that are supporting seniors in vulnerable situations. And like I said, we'll have more to say very soon on how we continue to support the seniors who built us this extraordinary country and to whom we owe so much thanks.
Our priority right from the outset has been to replace the income of people who had suddenly lost their jobs because of COVID-19. These were people who expected to receive a paycheck in order to pay for their groceries or pay their rent. And so we came forward quickly with measures such as the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. Some 7 million Canadians are now receiving that benefit. And it is urgent and essential that they have it. Now, for the seniors, there are a number who will also qualify for that emergency benefit because they have work income. But even if they have not lost their pension or their fixed income, they are having to absorb more costs because of COVID-19. And that's why we have brought in measures that will have an impact on them, whether it is additional GST payments or specific programs that support them. We are there to support them, and we will continue to be there for them, and we will have other announcements to make in the coming days as to how we will provide special support to our particularly vulnerable seniors who are going through difficult times, both in terms of the economy and their health.
A few minutes ago, in response to a colleague's question, you said that people don't have to go back to work if they don't feel safe there. Yesterday, workers outside of the Cargill meat plant, which is the largest outbreak in Canada, are saying that they don't feel safe going to work, even though their employers are saying that they've put measures in place. Should these workers be staying home, and what do you say to them if they're not feeling safe?
I'm not going to weigh in on specific cases in provincial jurisdiction, but I will say that it is a well-established principle in Canada and a hallmark of our values as a country that no one should be asked to work in unsafe conditions. That applies during a pandemic as well. We have put in many measures across various industries to minimize the risk, particularly around essential work. But we're going to have to be very careful to ensure that we're doing what we need to do right across the country, businesses, orders of governments, and all Canadians, to ensure the safety of the people who are working to provide for the rest of us.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Brian Mullen, Global News. Taiwan has donated 500,000 surgical masks needed by Canadian healthcare workers on the front lines of the pandemic. Your foreign minister wouldn't thank the country by name. Will you?
I'm happy to thank Taiwan for its generous donation. It is important at this point that Canadians and all people around the world pull together to be there for each other, because this is a global challenge that is going to face a global response. We need to do this together, and we will.
Marika Walsh with the Globe and Mail. The former Prime Minister of Australia, Malcolm Turnbull, says China is a bully and that the way for Canada to deal with China is to stand up for it instead of backing down. Is your government standing up to China, or is it backing away from China?
My responsibility as Prime Minister is to make sure that we're providing for Canadians and keeping Canadians safe. That's the job people expect me to do, and that is exactly what I'm doing. We're going to ensure that Canadians have the equipment, the supplies, the support they need to make it through this pandemic. And of course, at the same time, we will be asking difficult questions about how we're making it through this pandemic, how this came to happen, how we can learn from this. There'll be plenty of time for questions in the months to come. My focus, rightly, is on doing everything I can to help Canadians through this.
So are you standing up to China?
Merci beaucoup tout le monde.
All right, that is the Prime Minister of Canada on this Friday, in case you're still keeping track of days of the weeks, bringing some reaction to those stunning job numbers today, showing that 2 million more Canadians lost their job in the month of April, bringing the total of Canadians now unemployed to 3 million. Of course, we know the figure of people that are struggling is much larger than that, given many, many people have had their jobs reduced. But the big news today from the Prime Minister is that the wage subsidy program will be extended beyond June. And I'll bring in my colleagues to help me break some of that down, including other things the Prime Minister said. Vashi Kapelis and Catherine Cullen. Vashi?
So I agree, that's huge news. The extension of the wage subsidy, no details on how long it will be extended for. The Prime Minister says those details are coming next week. But that's the subsidy that the government is offering to any business, any size business, that has seen a 30% reduction in revenue, 15% if you're looking at March. You can compare that to January and February, an average of those months, or you can compare it to the same month last year. And again, the point is, it doesn't matter how many employees you have. You could have 5 or you could have 500. You can still access that program. They're paying 75% of wages up until a certain number, about $58,000. The extension of that program is going to mean a lot, and it actually really intersects with the stuff we were talking about prior to the Prime Minister's press conference, and that is the data out from Statistics Canada today on the number of people, the number of Canadians who have lost their jobs or lost at least half the hours that they normally work. A really, really key piece of data that underpins all that, especially where the month of April is concerned, is that almost 90% of those who were newly unemployed were on a temporary layoff. So they did expect, when the economy sort of came back to life, or whatever you want to call it, over time, that they would retain their employment, they would get their job back. The wage subsidy is directly addressed, extending that program would be directly addressing that, right? So as the economy, comes back, or as restrictions are loosened, stores are allowed to open up, the idea is that employers who have suffered a big revenue drop because perhaps they had to close or shutter their business to some degree will be able to rehire people through this wage subsidy. The amount of time, of course, that this is in effect is going to be really significant. Is this an extension, for example, of 4 months, of 6 months, of a month? That's going to make a meaningful difference to employers and people who run businesses. But on the flip side, I also sort of gleaned something from what the Prime Minister said, because it was often posited against the CERB program, right? Because there have been a lot of questions about what happens with that program. It runs for 4 months. Next week, people will have to apply to access their 3rd month. They've only got 1 month after that. I can't say for certain, but what it sounded like from the Prime Minister, the way in which he framed the issue, was the focus for the government, where financial aid is concerned, would move as economies reopen to that wage subsidy. And it didn't sound like there would be any kind of concrete extension of the CERB program. Obviously, that can always change, but it sounds like the focus very much is on the wage program versus extending the CERB.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he didn't say clearly, but it certainly sounds as though if they're putting if they're gambling on the wage subsidy program working, they are also hoping that fewer people need the CERB and they will all move to the wage subsidy program. Although I wonder what it also says, the fact that it is being prolonged, what that also says about the government's view of where the economy is going, and the fact that the economy will need, support beyond the months that we initially had thought. As you say, that we don't know how long they would give that support, but it certainly is indicative of how this is not obviously a rosy picture for the economy overall. Lots of questions and interesting comments by the Prime Minister too, Catherine, on the people who were affected in these job numbers as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm really struck by both the groups he named and the groups that are reflected in the data. He talked about the vulnerability of women, of youth, of new Canadians. And when you think about what Justin Trudeau hopes to stand for, the constituencies that he's tried to speak to, someone who sees himself as a feminist prime minister, somebody who made himself the minister for youth in his last mandate, he did try to offer a lot of assurance today, although I think it was broadly in the abstract, saying that these are things that they are going to be mindful of moving forward. He made the point that as he sees it, we are not in the stimulus phase yet, that they're still in the phase of taking care of people who are experiencing emergency situations. But there are a lot of questions already about what that rebuilding is going to look like. It was interesting to hear him talk about childcare and really sort of reshaping the economy. It's one of a number of big picture conversations, including long-term care, including health sector funding that the Prime Minister has promised we are going to have later. The expectations for those are going to be high, Rosie.
I'll just let people know if they are joining us on CBC News Network over the next few moments. We are going to continue our coverage here as we wait for the federal briefing by cabinet ministers and federal public health officials to give us an update on the picture of the pandemic in this country, but also maybe more details on the government's announcement today that the wage subsidy program will be extended into June. Also an announcement today by the Prime Minister that the Innovation Minister, Navdeep Bains, will be leading a sort of sectoral table to look at different industries, what their futures might be, what sort of ongoing support they might need. I'll just say that the other line that stood out for me as Catherine was talking about segments of the population that were affected, when he was talking about vulnerable workers or people that are undervalued, women, new Canadians, students, lots of students also out of work now. He said the following quote, "Equality is more than a goal, but it needs to be a concrete reality." So indeed, there's an interesting conversation going to happen as the economy shifts and as we all shift out of this at some point. Let me bring in the CBC's senior business correspondent before we head off to that next press conference. Peter Armstrong is here. He's also been looking at the numbers and trying to give us maybe a better state of how they reflect the state of the economy. Oh, maybe we don't have him yet. Okay, we'll come back to him. Let me go to my other colleagues then, Vashti and Catherine. Oh, he came back. Okay, gals, sorry. I'm going to go to Peter. He came back. I'll be right back to you. Here's Peter. He's probably working remotely. We don't see him. Well, then we'll wait. We hear him. Okay, I'm not sure everyone wants to look at me for 2 minutes, but Peter, tell us what these job numbers tell you about the state of the economy and how bad this is and it's going to be.
Yeah, and I think that's the key here is how bad is it going to be? We've seen these numbers. They're staggering, and they're so big that they're kind of hard to get your head around. They seem almost abstract. When you're talking 3 million Canadians have lost their jobs. Remember, though, we're now looking at, I think it's 7.6 million Canadians have applied for some kind of relief. So we've got another 850,000 Canadians on top of these numbers that have been added in. And to me, the big question here is what does this tell us about what the recovery will look like? And I think a lot of questions are there now about, how quickly are you going to go back to your local cafe, to have lunch in a restaurant, to go to the movies on a Friday night, to get back to life in general. And the more we think about that, the clearer picture we as consumers have around what our activity will be, I think, businesses are going to be thinking about that and factoring it in to how quickly they ramp back up. Are they going to go back to full employment right away? It sure doesn't seem like it, because I think most of us aren't going to do that. So that's why that flexibility in the program, like we saw today with the Prime Minister adding in extra months of capacity to the CERB and to other programs, is so important, because this is not going to be what they call that V-shaped recovery. It's much more likely to be a long check mark of sorts that's just going to take time. And I think a lot of that is going to be on us as consumers as we revisit what we're willing to spend our money on, where we're willing to go, and how safe we feel going back into a lot of the businesses we used to go to every day.
Well, and as the Prime Minister talked about the wage subsidy program being extended, he also mentioned that this is not about stimulus at this point, although we also know that the stimulus part of this will look very different than it would look outside of another sort of more typical recession like the one we experienced in 2008.
that is such an important point here, because remember, like, the stimulus program in 2008 was a bunch of shovel-ready programs, just get people working again, and hey, let's lower interest rates and encourage consumers to borrow and spend. And we did really well in that. We took on record levels of debt, but we probably saved the economy in doing that. And it's an important point, because we're not going to be able to count on the consumer to spend our way out of this recession this time. And whatever sort of stimulus programs that we're looking at in terms of, like, shovel-ready programs, they're not going to address those people that you guys were just talking about with Vashi, the most vulnerable, the women. The services sector doesn't respond the same way as manufacturing and construction will. And so they need to really think creatively about how can we use the federal weight and power and money to get those sort of services sector jobs back up and running. And is that more of a program of awareness and of help in getting those businesses to a place where they do make people feel more comfortable to go back in, and increasing their capacity and changing sort of sidewalk patterns and road patterns so you can have more, sort of patio and terrace capacity for restaurants and cafes? It's going to take creative thinking, because there has never been a services-driven recession before. There are always sort of goods producing sectors that get hit first, and then services get dragged into it later. This is different, will require a completely different response.
Okay, Peter Armstrong, good to hear you, even if we couldn't see you. Appreciate that. He's the CBC News senior business correspondent. I want to take us to someone who is experiencing unemployment in Saskatoon, Rebecca Zirk. She wants to return to her work as a hairstylist. We talked to her about a month ago, so she's still not working, but she has some concerns about how her industry is going to adjust. Good to see you again, Rebecca.
Thank you for having me back.
So you are still on CERB, if I would imagine. You're into your probably, yeah. So you're on your third payment or your last payment?
This will be my second.
Okay.
The days
All
are
right.
blurred together.
I know, that's true. I shouldn't be asking timeline questions at this point. Now, Saskatchewan is slowly moving to reopen a bit. What is happening with the hair salon industry? Can you go back? Is it safe to go back?
So they've opened phase 1, which starts with like outdoor activities, things like that. Some very simple things to kind of maintain social distancing. Hairdressing is one of the personal services that's included in phase 2, along with things like massage therapy and other similar services. My main concern is going back to work safely. If you can imagine, I miss my work so much. I'm tired of being at home. I'm tired of being away from my clients. I miss my work so much. However, I am so concerned about the safety aspect of going back to work.
Well, we should also add that you're also pregnant, so that's sort of an added complication, I would imagine, something you're considering and thinking about. Do you have any sense of whether there would be PPE, personal protective equipment, for you if you were going to go back?
So we've been given guidelines and suggestions for PPE. However, my concern is, one, affordable access. As a self-employed person who's been out of work for almost 2 months, we're reducing our hours and capacity and also adding an extra cost on top of our operating, as well as where the heck do I get it? I've reached out to so many different spaces. However, the average cost has increased. For example, a box of 50 surgical masks used to be around $15. The average is now $50 to $60. So if you're able to find it, and more than once. So the concern is a regular access to it, a long-term access to it, and also how to use it. I've never been trained how to use an N95. I've never been trained how to do hospital or healthcare grade sanitation. You know, my work is very surface level. However, at times like this, we have to really consider every single avenue to ensure the safety of myself as well as my clients and the public.
So I'm not sure if you heard the Prime Minister, but he's extended the wage subsidy program. But of course, that doesn't do anything for people who are self-employed like yourself. And the CERB, it didn't sound to me, I mean, he didn't say this concretely, but it didn't sound to me like that will be extended, because he's hoping, obviously, that companies use the wage subsidy program. Do you feel like you are just going to have to be sort of forced back to work in some way because you're just not going to have any further support, possibly?
Absolutely. That is my biggest concern. Obviously, my biggest concern is operating safely. The health and safety of myself, my child, and my clients, and my family on top of that too. is top priority. However, I feel like I'll almost be forced to go back to work in an unsafe environment because I can't financially support not working and not receiving any kind of benefit. So what that'll either happen is put me in a situation where I'd have to risk my health to go back to work, which is a direct contradiction of what he said today in regards to safe working conditions for all Canadians, or have no income.
Well, I mean, as you know, they've been sort of creating policy on the fly. Maybe there will be something that can be done for people who are self-employed, like yourself, who won't get the wage subsidy but might need to carry on with the CERB a little bit longer. You know, I don't know where they're at in terms of that, but I'm sure that they're hearing you because, as the Prime Minister said, no one is wanting anyone to go back to work if they feel unsafe, as you've well spoken about there. Rebecca, good to see you again. Hang in there. I'm at work every day, so I can sympathize with the idea of being at home every day. That's also a difficult endeavor.
Thank you again for having me.
Okay, stay healthy and look after that baby in there. Appreciate it. It's Rebecca Zirk in Saskatoon. All right, I'll bring back my colleagues, Vashi and Catherine, as we stand by for the update, the press conference from ministers and public health officials. So that, I mean, again, the Prime Minister didn't say anything about the CERB, so maybe there will have to be, though, some interim measures there for people that will sort of be stuck, which is, you know, how this has unfolded many times with the policy. A policy is announced, we find people that are missed or not captured, but the people who can't move to the wage subsidy, like Rebecca, and maybe don't feel okay going back to work, it does sort of leave some questions, I think, for the government about what those people should be doing and whether they should get further relief and support going forward. Vashi.
Yeah, and even to take it a step further, Rosie, there are people who, for example, can access the CERB right now, cannot access the wage subsidy, also cannot access the, and I know I'm banging on a bit of a drum here, but I keep hearing from them, can't access the business loan. So people who have contractors, for example, who they pay instead of people on the payroll or who are themselves self-employed, similar to the situation that your last guest was in, but can't access anything to keep their business going or use dividends, for example. And they have been asking, where do we fit into all of this for weeks? The government has so far not provided any details about how they might be helped other than sending them to a regional economic development agency. But even there, they're not getting specific help for it. So there are further questions. Extending the wage subsidy, I think, will be welcome news by so many businesses. We know 96,000 as of Monday had applied for it. They were supposed to be getting, at least 90% of them, their money starting yesterday. So certainly I'm not taking away from that at all, but there are and there continue to be people who fall through the cracks. And my guess is, as we move into this phase where things are not all shut down, you're going to see more examples of that. So even for people, for example, where the emergency business loan has run out, it's $40,000. How much rent does that cover, especially in a big market? How much of your fixed cost does that cover? What happens to them after this? I think that, you know, you hit with Peter the point that the Prime Minister made that we're not even in the stimulus part of this. And I wonder how long it will be until we are in that part of it. And so what happens in the meantime? What if it is until we have a vaccine? That's the next year and a half that the government has to sort of figure out how to support all these different segments of society, of the economy, in a way that they have never had to previously, right? No recession has required this level of support, and perhaps for this long. And I can't imagine the sort of policy considerations that are before them right now.
Yeah, and a reminder that this is what the government has called the biggest government aid package in history, certainly not a wartime package, $73 billion. So even adding on extra time to the wage subsidy program, maybe we'll get some details at this press conference or next week, but that obviously the ticket behind that, it grows for the government and it then takes on more debt. So all these things have to be thought about. It is incredibly difficult to navigate. That's for sure. Catherine, just over to you on those points.
Yeah, well, one thing I want to pick up on something else the Prime Minister said, which is in some ways the other side of the coin, obviously, and understandably we're talking today about people who have lost their jobs or who are not working, who have no hours right now. But he did make that comment that no Canadian should work somewhere where they are concerned about their health and safety. And he was pressed by one of our colleagues about the situation in Cargill. He said it is a precedent, it is a standard in Canada that we don't want people to go into jobs where they do not feel safe. I think, though, it's important to reflect, certainly the conditions at the Cargill meat plant are one example, but I couldn't help thinking, as he said, that the first time of stories coming out of Quebec, particularly Ontario as well. There are stories in Quebec, for instance, of nurses wearing garbage bags as protective equipment. There are stories that our colleagues at CBC Montreal have done about speech therapists, social workers, people who are part of the healthcare system but do not normally get themselves involved in direct patient care, who were told if you do not go into these long-term care centres, you will be fired. So I think the standard that the Prime Minister is talking about is certainly one that we as Canadians would all like to see, but even his announcement yesterday about trying to encourage and protect, let's say, essential workers by offering them a wage top-up, we have to acknowledge that many of the people who are out there working right now probably feel some degree of risk to their health and safety. While we might hope that that's the standard, I think for many people, to some extent, it's not right now.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, there are, as the Prime Minister said, labor standards inside a province, then they have to companies are supposed to, adhere to those. Exactly. And obviously, that's what everyone would hope is happening. I'm not sure how much the federal government can do to ensure that it happens, although I suppose they could say and make it very clear that if you don't want to go to work and you don't feel safe, that you will continue to get a benefit. That seems to me the only way you could really support that idea that safety is an issue for a lot of people and will be going forward. I mean, you heard there from our friend Rebecca, she doesn't even know where to get things if she was going to go into work, and I'm sure she's not alone in that. Where do you get the equipment that you would need to be right in someone's face? I mean, it's a challenging thing. Yes, Vashi.
I was just going to say that I think from speaking with some of the people who work at Cargill, and in particular, more publicly, the representative of the union there, the president of the union who represents those workers, though we hear from various levels of government about jurisdiction, to them, jurisdiction is not as salient a point, right? Like, they are looking for the federal government because they don't feel that they are safe at this point. They don't necessarily have the faith in the regulator that does exist. And I take the point that that's supposed to happen from occupational safety in the province. They want an investigation led by the federal government. They are hoping that someone intervenes. And I think there are a lot of issues like that right now. For example, transit. We heard the Prime Minister say, well, that's a provincial jurisdiction. The province are saying, we're broke. We already have a lot of debt, right? Like, people who need to access that affordable transit, and you can even add Greyhound and other bus carriers to that, which have now suspended all of their business. They're not taking anyone anywhere. They're asking for help from the federal government too. And I hear what the federal government is saying in that these issues are, by and large, provincial jurisdiction, but for the people who are affected by them, that jurisdiction isn't necessarily paramount. And I think, the Prime Minister wouldn't say anything about Cargill, and my guess is those who work there were hoping for a bit more.
Yeah, those are all fair points. I mean, I think there are wonderful things about living in a federation, and then there are things that are extremely complicated too. Vashi and Catherine, thank you. I'll go now to the press conference. Federal ministers and public health officials giving an update. This is, of course, the Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland.
And you can't go out to see your friends. However, Sunday is Mother's Day, and if you can give your mom a big hug and maybe help your family by cleaning the house, I am sure that all moms across the country would really appreciate that.
Let's start by saying something to all the poor children of Canada. I know that this is such a difficult time for you, cooped up at home and not able to go and play with your friends. But Sunday is Mother's Day. And I would really like to say, if you can, give your mother a hug, give her a kiss. If you can, maybe help clean up the house a little bit. I know it's hard for you, but it is really also a hard time for parents across the country. And I know your parents, and especially your mothers, would really appreciate it. And in the interests of disclosure, I must say I do have a personal interest in sharing this message with the children of Canada. So today we will hear from Canada's Chief Public Health Officer, Dr. Theresa Tam. the Deputy Chief Public Health Officer, Dr. Howard New. By video link, our Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Disability Inclusion, Carla Qualtrough. Par vidéoconférence, le ministre du Patrimoine
Via
canadien,
video
Stephen
conference, the
Guilbeault.
Minister of Canadian Heritage,
By
Stephen
video link, the
Guilbeault.
Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, Navdeep Bains. Et le Président du Conseil du Trésor, Jean-Yves
And the
Duclos.
President of Treasury Board, Jean-Yves Duclos.
Good afternoon and bonjour à toutes et à tous.
Good afternoon to all of you.
Numbers on COVID-19 in Canada. There are now 65,399 confirmed cases, including 4,471 deaths, and 29,000 or 45% of cases have now recovered. Labs across Canada have tested over 1,032,000 people for COVID-19, with about 6% of these testing positive to date. In the past week, we've tested an average of over 26,000 people daily. We've had quite a few questions about lab testing capacity versus our daily lab testing levels. So I want to take a moment to explain this a little bit further. To be clear, when we talked about a current lab capacity to do 60,000 tests a day in Canada, this is about building up our ability to detect any surge in cases as we relax public health measures. Specifically, a robust testing capacity is a vital component of our case finding, contact tracing, isolation and quarantine approach to rapidly corner the virus. So how do we know we are testing enough? One relatively simple international benchmark for testing is the percentage of tests that come back positive. The lower the percentage of positive tests, the better your surveillance is. When the positive test is really high, it means you're missing a lot of infections. The WHO benchmark is to aim for a positivity rate of 10% or below, striking the balance between casting the net wide, that is high sensitivity, while targeting testing where the virus is most likely to be spreading. Canada has maintained a percentage positive rate below 10% throughout the epidemic. Most encouragingly, our average weekly percent positive rate has been declining from 9.8% in early April to about 4% now in early May. At the same time, we have doubled the number of people being tested weekly since early April, indicating we are casting the net wide. Right now, our testing strategy is evolving as the epidemic slows. In many areas of Canada, testing is broadening to include people with a range of milder symptoms. Provinces and territories are increasing their testing to target people working or living in higher risk settings, such as healthcare, long-term care, correctional facilities, certain work and congregate living settings. When it comes to testing, it's not the number that matters so much, but knowing that you are testing the right people at the right time, in the right place. There are multiple other ways that have been proposed to gauge whether countries are testing enough. Regardless of the method, Canada stacks up well against other countries, but we can always do better. This is why we continue to increase our testing capacity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Tam. Et maintenant, je donne la parole au Dr. Howard New.
And now, Dr. Howard New. Dr. New, please.
Bonjour. Comme d'habitude,
Thank you. As usual, I will start with the latest numbers on COVID-19 cases in Canada. There are currently 65,399 confirmed cases, including 4,471 deaths and 29,000 now recovered, or 45%. Labs across Canada have tested over 1,032,000 people for COVID-19 to date, with about 6% of these testing positive overall. In the past week, we've tested an average of over 26,000 people per day. We've had quite a few questions about laboratory capacity versus our daily laboratory testing levels. So I want to take a moment to explain this further. To be clear, when we talked about a current lab capacity to do 60,000 tests a day in Canada, this was about building up our ability to detect any surge in cases as we relax public health measures. Specifically, a robust testing capacity is a vital component of our case finding, contact tracing, isolation and quarantine approach to rapidly corner the virus. So, how do we know we are testing enough? One relatively simple international benchmark for testing is the percentage of tests that come back positive. The lower the percentage of positive tests, the better your surveillance is. When the positivity rate is really high, it means you're missing a lot of infections. The WHO benchmark is to aim for a positivity rate of 10% or below, striking the balance between casting the net wide, high sensitivity, while targeting testing where the virus is most likely to be spreading. Canada has maintained maintained percentage positive rates below 10% throughout the epidemic, and most encouragingly, our average weekly percentage positive rate has been steadily declining from 9.8% in early April to about 4% in early May. At the same time, we've doubled the number of people being tested weekly since early April, indicating we are casting the net wide. Right now, our testing strategy is evolving as the epidemic slows in many areas of Canada. Testing is broadening to include people with a range of milder symptoms. Provinces and territories have increased their testing capacity to target people who are working in and living in high-risk areas, such as those working in healthcare, long-term care, correctional facilities, and certain work and congregate living settings. When it comes to testing, it's not the number that matters so much, but knowing that you are testing the right people at the right time in the right place. There are many other ways that have been proposed to gauge whether countries are testing enough. Regardless of the method, Canada stacks up well against other countries, but we can always do better, which is why we continue to increase our testing capacity. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. New.
I will turn it over to Carla Qualtrough. Carla, please.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Today's numbers of 2 million jobs lost in April show that COVID-19 is having a real impact on communities and families right across the country. Since the beginning of this crisis, we've been focused on providing Canadians with the support they need as we work together to contain the spread of the virus and on ensuring we have the tools in place to keep our people safe.
That's why our government has taken unprecedented measures to support Canadians and their families during this difficult time.
We introduced the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy to help keep as many Canadians as possible working. To help Canadians who have lost income due to COVID-19, we introduced the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, which provides $2,000 a month to those who need it most. Along the way, we've worked to ensure this benefit is as inclusive as possible to reflect the different realities that Canadians face. To date, over 7 million Canadians have access to the CERB. We know that today's job numbers also demonstrate the real challenges that young people are currently facing in our country. While many have been able to access the CERB, many other young Canadians are anxious about their employment prospects, especially this summer. That's why we announced the Canada Emergency Student Benefit. Students who are not eligible for the CERB will be able to apply to receive $1,250 per month between May and August. Students with permanent disabilities and those with dependents could receive an additional $750 per month. We know that you have additional expenses during this crisis, and we are here to support you. I'm happy to say that we'll have more details about the application process for the CESB soon. In the meantime, eligible students should set up their MyCRA account to set themselves for direct deposit so that when applications begin, they can get their first payment very, very shortly.
These initiatives, as well as the top-up for the Canada Child Benefit and the GST credit, will quickly get more money to Canadians when they need it the most.
Provinces begin to lift restriction and our government continues to take steps toward economic recovery, we'll be there for Canadians. We'll get through these challenging times together. Thank you. Merci.
Okay, thank you, Carla. Et maintenant, je donne la parole à Stephen Guilbeault.
And now I will give the floor to Mr. Guilbeault, the Minister of Heritage. Go ahead, Minister.
Merci, Christian. Bonjour tout le monde. Hello, everyone. Our culture, heritage, and sports sectors are going through a major crisis. They're under enormous financial pressures because of the isolation measures that deprive them of their audience and their income. The situation is critical. We've moved quickly to stabilize these sectors, which are an important driver of the Canadian economy. On April 17th, the Government of Canada announced a fund of up to $500 million to help the cultural, heritage, and sports sectors. Today, I'm pleased to announce the details, as I know that many are eager to hear more.
The fund will be paid out in 2 stages and will help, amongst other things, meet the needs of organizations which have been touched, will help maintain jobs, and will help keep organizations going whose cash flow and operational viability in the short term are undermined by the pandemic. The fund comes on top of Canada's COVID-19 economic response plan to make sure that no one is left behind.
Canadian Heritage will distribute financial support through its program and will work closely with its partners, specifically the Canada Council for the Arts, the Canada Media Fund, Factor, Musique Action, and Téléfilm Canada.
Our decisions with regard to funding will take into account traditionally marginalized communities, as well as the LGBTQ2, Aboriginal, and minority official language communities.
Full details can be found on the Canadian Heritage website. Our program officers will be in direct contact with the organizations through the usual communications channels starting today. They will do everything they can to address the most pressing concerns. We know that organizations are facing all kinds of serious challenges right now and are doing their best to get through it all. This is why we've put together a streamlined process to distribute these funds.
Our artists, creators, and athletes are key to building healthy, tight, inclusive, and proud Canadian communities. During the lockdown, they helped us feel a little less alone. Their resilience and their acts of solidarity have touched us all. They're still there for us, and we want to be there for them.
Canadians stand behind our creators, artists, and athletes, and we have a message for them. We miss you, we need you, and we will meet again in person.
Okay, merci beaucoup, Stephen.
Thank you very much, Stephen.
Now we are going to hear from the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, Navdeep Bains. Please, Nav.
Thank you very much, Christia, and good afternoon, everyone. Since the beginning of this crisis, our goal has been to do everything we can to assist our frontline workers and to ensure the safety and support of Canadians as we navigate this pandemic and these unprecedented economic times. As today's job numbers show, many people are hurting because of COVID-19.
We know that workers in certain sectors were hit very hard. We have to understand their challenges and we have to continue to support them.
Our approach is to be proactive and strategic and designed to bring the private sector to the table to directly share their perspectives on the scope of the challenges being faced. As our government examines what is needed in this immediate crisis, we need to fully understand all of the challenges. Effective immediately, we're establishing an industry strategy council tasked with helping us identify these challenges. The council will leverage an existing and trusted public-private forum known as Canada's Economic Strategy Tables, where business leaders can share perspectives regarding the challenges they're facing as a result of COVID-19. In response to some particular pressures related to the pandemic, we're adding 2 new tables representing the retail and transportation sectors. They join our existing tables, which have been represented by advanced manufacturing, agro-food, clean technology, digital industries, health and bioscience, tourism and hospitality, and resources of the future. Les membres du Conseil vont rencontrer régulièrement.
Over the next 90 days, the Council will meet regularly to identify and understand sectoral pressures that are common across our economy, and members of the Council will help us better understand the challenges.
These pressures range from workforce disruptions to reestablishment of supply chains and consumer confidence, to name a few.
I would like to thank Monique Leroux, who has accepted our invitation to chair the Council. Ms. Leroux has one of the most distinguished careers in Canadian finance, and her impressive background makes her the perfect fit to lead this Council.
And we will be announcing the rest of the Council members in the coming days. Just as we've seen with industry stepping up to assist with personal protective equipment production and medical countermeasures, we are going to work in collaboration with our industry to understand and to make sure that we come out of this stronger and we come out of this together. And with the help of the Industry Strategy Council, we'll do exactly that. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Okay, thank you, Nav. Maintenant, je donne la parole à
And now,
Jean-Yves Duclos,
I will give the floor to Jean-Yves Duclos, the President of Treasury Board. Go ahead, Jean-Yves. Thank you very much, Christia, and hello to everyone. The message this morning from the Prime Minister is a message of hope and courage following the recent Statistics Canada survey on unemployment. I'm an economist, and for me, the statistics are shocking, but as a Member of Parliament, this is unbelievable, because behind the numbers are thousands of families and workers affected by the crisis. Thankfully, we can count on each other to come through this pandemic, thanks to the measures the Canadian government has already announced, including the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, the Emergency Wage Benefit as well, which was mentioned again by the Prime Minister this morning and which will be extended. So it is in a context where we know that after the crisis, if we keep on taking care of each other, not only will we all be stronger, but we will always keep on looking after each other. Thank you, Christia. Thank you, Jean-Yves. We are now ready to take questions.
As usual, we'll start on the phone with 3 questions, 1 question, 1 follow-up, and then we'll turn to the room. Operator.
Thank you. Please press star 1 at this time if you have a question. Puis s'il vous plaît, appuyez sur étoile 1 maintenant pour poser une question. The first question, la première question, est de Marie Vastel du Devoir. À vous la parole.
Yes, hello. My question is for Minister Qualtrough, and it is about the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. Schools and daycares are starting to open. In Quebec, it'll be on Monday, and yet some teachers and daycare workers feel that going back to work would be a threat to their own health and safety. So I would like to know whether a personal assessment should be carried out if a person feels they might be in danger if they go back to work, and if so, would that person still be eligible for the CERB if it is deemed they can't stay home? Thank you for the question. It's an important question. Of course, we want to be sure that Canadian workers are safe when they go back to work. And we expect workplaces to do everything they can to ensure the health and safety of their employees by working with public health authorities. There are guides for employers to ensure that workplaces are safe. Now, of course, a worker has the right to refuse to work if he or she does not feel safe in the workplace. But for us, the point is to work with employers to ensure that the workplaces are indeed safe, so that all workers can feel confident that their own health and safety are the priority of the employers. So you are saying that a person has the right to refuse to go back to work? In other words, can daycare workers decide not to go to work and still be eligible for the Canada Emergency Response Benefit? Would such an application be accepted? Well, the CERB is available to anyone not able to work for reasons related to COVID-19. If you cannot work because of COVID, you're eligible. It's a personal choice, but I want to reinforce the message that we want Canadians to go back to work. And we want employers to create safe workplaces where the health and safety of their workers is of utmost priority.
Thank you. Merci. The next question, la prochaine question, is from Mike Blanchfield from the Canadian Press. Please go ahead.
Hello, Deputy Prime Minister. This question is for you. The job loss numbers out today are at historic levels in both Canada and the U.S., and yet we're seeing dramatically different responses. There's pressure in the U.S. to reopen the economy and get back to work, but that hasn't seemed to manifest itself in Canada in the same way. How do you explain the difference?
Thanks for the question, Mike, and it's nice to hear your voice. You are absolutely right that the jobs numbers are historic and are and should be profoundly worrying for all Canadians. Our country is going through a very, very trying economic time. In terms of what that means when it comes to our government response and to the response of Canadians across the country, I think Canadians are so smart and they are so sensible. We all knew, we all understood that physical distancing, that shutting the country down was an essential response to the coronavirus. We understood that, we got that, and I'm so proud of Canadians for following that advice. And the good news is, as a result of following that advice, we are making real progress in beating the virus. The same sensible, prudent, smart approach needs to guide the restart. And I think Canadians understand profoundly that the biggest mistake we could make right now would be to squander our hard-won gains. It has been really tough to get here, and the job numbers today show what a big sacrifice we have been making. Our job now, collectively, is to build on that progress and to be sure that as we look towards restarting the economy, we do it very carefully, very prudently, and in a way that will prevent the virus from surging back and enveloping us all. What that does mean, that careful, prudent, smart approach, is that the government has to be there to support Canadians who are doing the right thing. And that is why our government has put in place the largest economic program in Canadian history to support Canadians and to support Canadian companies. We are making really good progress. There is still a way to go in the fight against the virus. And as the Prime Minister said earlier today, the government is here to support Canadians, to support businesses as we finish off that fight. We're going to get there.
Mike, follow up.
Yes, Deputy Prime Minister. Well, given this hard effort that has gone into all of this to get us to this point. What are you saying in your discussions to the United States about the uneven approach that's taking place down there, and what concerns are you expressing about how this might affect Canada, given that it's our largest economic partner, our neighbor, and we share a border with them?
Well, let me just say, Mike, first of all, that we had a very productive conversation yesterday, the Prime Minister and the Premiers. I was fortunate enough to be able to be part of that conversation too, about the restart, about the continued efforts to fight the coronavirus, and also about our border with the United States. In terms of our conversations with the United States, they have been very appropriate to our relationship. They have been really neighborly. They've been really practical and really effective. The border measures that we have put in place, which are unprecedented and have restricted non-essential travel, but have allowed essential travel to continue, have really worked. And our experience of them in Canada is that those border measures have cut down travel across the border very, very much. But at the same time, essential travel continues. We have been in touch with our American partners, and they have exactly the same experience on their side of the border. So that shows that they are really effective. And I think that that is really positive for Canada, for Canadians, for our economy, and it speaks well of our relationship.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. Operator, next question, please.
Thank you. Merci. The next question, la prochaine question est de Micheline Laflamme de Radio-Canada. À vous la parole.
Micheline Laflamme, Radio-Canada. Thank you, Mr. Baines. You chaired the Industrial Strategy Council. What do you expect of this council? What will it do in the next 90 days? Are you expecting short-term recommendations? And what economic sectors will be a priority for the Industry Strategy Council? Thank you for your question. I would like to point to the importance to the exceptional leadership of the Council. Monique Leroux has experience in the retail and auto sectors, amongst others. She has a lot of experience, and I am sure that she will work with myself and my colleagues to pinpoint the challenges in each of these sectors. For the moment, we are focusing on addressing the crisis now because the situation is very serious. Over time, however, I hope that we will be able to find solutions to help improve the conditions for workers. Micheline, a follow-up. Ms. Freeland or Mr. Baines, we know that large American auto manufacturers will soon open up their plants again. Have you spoken with your American counterparts, and how are plants going to be reopened in Canada, auto plants? Well, allow me to begin, and Nav can complete my answer, because I know that Nav is working closely with our automotive sector. That's a very good question, and it is key for us to work with our American partners. I know that the Canadian automotive sector is very integrated with the American auto sector. Our industry also has a great deal of international experience within the context of the coronavirus. Many Canadian companies today are working in China in conditions where COVID-19 is present. So I know that our sector has a lot of experience. It will find a way forward, and our sector is working closely with the federal government, with the Americans, and with the provinces. Nav, would you like to add something?
Yes, I agree with what my colleague just said. She is right. So it's quite straightforward. We have to work with our American partners. The auto sector is as present in Canada as it is in the US, and both sectors are integrated. However, our first priority is the safety of Canadian workers, so we will look at the situation closely every day. However, I am sure that the sector will find solutions which will be to the benefit of workers.
Turn to the room. Starting with Rachel Haynes from CTV.
Hi, ministers and doctors. Rachel Haynes from CTV National News. My first question actually goes to Dr. Tam about the outbreak at the Cargill meat facility and the outbreak in High River as well. We've seen a large number of people who have been infected there, but a small number of deaths in that community. Can you tell us a little bit about why you think that is when there is such a large outbreak that there would be such a small number of fatalities?
So obviously the province of Alberta is working extremely hard, and my colleague, the Chief Medical Officer of Health there, so they are providing guidance to the industry and trying to, as rapidly as possible, get these outbreaks under control. In terms of deaths, I mean, obviously right now the outbreak is still undergoing evolution, but we know that the fatalities mainly occur in people over a certain age. So it's definitely over 60, but obviously at 70 or 80 years old, you're at a higher risk. So I think part of this might be related to the age groups that might be affected. But we also know that it's not just the workers, it could be their families. So it may depend on what families the workers might be living with, for example. But we do know that the case fatality is driven very much by the long-term care facility outbreaks right now. So I think the work environment is different, but it is definitely a setting where really rapid response when we get cases, in terms of testing and case finding and contact tracing is very important.
Thank you. And my next question is a bit of a two-parter for Mr. Duclos and Minister Freeland. About the wage subsidy, Mr. Duclos, you said a few days ago that businesses would start seeing that wage subsidy. So have all businesses who have been approved gotten that money? And as well, the Prime Minister did say earlier today that as we start to reopen economies, more people will be going back to work and will need the wage subsidy more so than the CERB. But for businesses who have had to shutter completely, for those people, and after June when they don't get the CERB anymore, what is available to them?
Thank you. If I may start with the statistics on the emergency wage subsidies. So as of yesterday, 120,000 businesses had applied, and almost 100,000, I think the precise number is 97,000 of them had their application approved, for a total of 1.7 million workers. So these are a large number of workers, and we are very not only proud of the impact of that program, but we're also very mindful that this is going to be important as we move forward. As you said, the value and the objective of that program was to maintain the important relationship, worker-employer relationship, as we move through the crisis. And the great news is that a number of businesses, and we expect that to be continually improving, a number of these businesses are going to be able to maintain that important relationship. And as the Prime Minister announced this morning, we believe that it's important to extend that wage subsidies so that businesses have the ability to hire even more workers on the wage subsidies.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I very much agree with Jean-Yves, and I would just add, the wage subsidy program is really, really important, particularly now as we are able to begin looking cautiously with great prudence towards economic reopening. because we really all appreciate that the reopening is going to have to be very careful and very gradual. And what the wage subsidy does is it allows a business to operate even not at full capacity. And it allows that business, which is operating not at full capacity, to continue to employ and pay its workers. And I think that the wage subsidy has been a great tool so far. I think we're going to find it to be an even more valuable tool as we carefully move towards reopening our economy.
Businesses who have shuttered and won't be reopening even in the next few months.
Well, there is an ability for not only rehiring, but hiring workers and new workers included. So it's designed in a manner that gives the businesses the flexibility on the decision and the timing of the decision that they want to use. So it's designed for that particular purpose. We understand that businesses have faced the crisis in many different ways, and that they may want to start hiring new workers at different times, and that's why extending this wage subsidies is important.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre. On va repasser au téléphone.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. We will move to the lines for 3 more questions.
Next question. La prochaine question est de Émilie Bergeron de l'agence QMI. À vous la parole.
Émilie Bergeron.
Oui, bonjour. Ma question est pour Monsieur
Thank you. My question is for Mr. Duclos. As far as the wage subsidy is concerned, or perhaps for Ms. Qualtrough, now, this program is being extended, and so what is the potential cost of this measure? According to the Parliamentary Budget Officer, we're up to a cost of $75 billion. So by extending this program, how much could it potentially cost? Of the applications received, how many have been processed so far? Now, with regard to the fiscal impact of this measure, even though we would like to have an exact figure, it's hard to know what the number will be because we are in a period of uncertainty. The Parliamentary Budget Officer has done very good work forecasting, but there's no accuracy in the current uncertain context, and we don't know what the number will be until June 6th, or what the number will be after it is extended beyond June 6th. As for, or rather, Émilie, would you mind repeating the question,
we are going to pull
please?
away from this federal briefing on the response by the federal government to COVID-19, as well as an update from public health officials on the state of the pandemic in this country. If you want to keep watching, go to our website, cbc.ca/politics. The focus today, not only on the massive amount of job loss that has happened in this country, but also on the government's decision to make the wage subsidy program move past the month of June. We got some updated numbers there from the president of the Treasury Board saying that now 120,000 businesses have applied to use that subsidy, which, remember, allows them to pay which allows them to get some aid from the government to pay their employees. And they say that that will help 1.7 million workers in this country, which is probably much needed because the labor market report out this morning tells us that another 2 million Canadians lost their jobs in the month of April as the economy went into a deep freeze. Now we're at 3 million Canadians who no longer have employment. Add to that, though, the large number of Canadians who have lost significant hours in their work. We are more at 5.5 million people who are suffering because of that and using either the emergency relief benefit and the government hopes soon the wage subsidy program as we move to the next phase of this. And I should just mention that in those unemployment numbers, some areas, some people hit much harder than others. Students, more vulnerable workers, new Canadians, and women. So something to focus on in the days ahead, of course. Our coverage continues here on CBC News Network with Andrew Nichols. I'm Rosemary Barton. I'll see you back here tomorrow.